When Marcus got into that car, the driver said, "We used to live in the same neighborhood as kids, don't you remember me?" But Marcus had never lived in that city before. Marcus Chen stood on the shoulder of Interstate 77 in North Carolina, watching the afternoon sun filter through the pine trees that lined the highway. He'd been walking for 2 hours since his last ride had dropped him off at a truck stop, and his legs were starting to feel the miles. The October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of cooler weather ahead. Marcus adjusted his backpack and checked his phone. Still 3 hours until sunset, and Charlotte was still 40 miles away. But Marcus had no idea that this ride would challenge everything he thought he knew about his own past. A silver Honda Accord slowed down and pulled over about 30 yards ahead of him. Marcus jogged toward the car, grateful for any break from walking. The driver was a man in his mid-30s with dark hair and a friendly smile. He wore a plaid flannel shirt and had the kind of easygoing demeanor that put people at ease immediately. "Need a lift?" the man called out through his open window. "Definitely," Marcus replied. "I'm heading toward Charlotte if you're going anywhere in that direction." "Perfect timing. I'm going right through downtown. I'm Tom, by the way. Tom Bradley." Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, immediately appreciating the warmth and the classic rock playing softly on the radio. "Thanks for stopping, Tom. I'm Marcus." Tom pulled back onto the highway, and as they drove, he kept glancing at Marcus with a puzzled expression. "Marcus," Tom said after they'd been driving for about 10 minutes. "This might sound crazy, but you look really familiar. We used to live in the same neighborhood as kids, don't you remember me?" Marcus searched his memory, but came up empty. "What neighborhood was that?" "Elmwood Heights, over on the west side of Charlotte. You lived on Maple Street, right? Your family had that blue house with the big oak tree in the front yard." Marcus felt a strange chill. "Tom, I've never lived in Charlotte before. This is actually my first time visiting the city." Tom looked genuinely confused. "That's impossible. I remember you so clearly. We used to play basketball together at the community center. Your mom made those amazing chocolate chip cookies." "I think you have me confused with someone else," Marcus said carefully. But Tom wasn't letting it go.
No, I'm sure it's you.
"Marcus Chen, right? Your dad worked at the bank downtown, and your mom was a teacher at Elmwood Elementary." The details were so specific, so confident, that Marcus began to doubt his own memory for a moment. But he knew he'd grown up in California, not North Carolina. "Tom, I grew up in San Diego. My parents still live there. I've never been to Charlotte before today." Tom pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face Marcus directly. "Marcus, this is going to sound strange, but I remember your 8th birthday party. It was at Chuck E. Cheese. And you wore that red Superman t-shirt. Your mom invited all the kids from the neighborhood." Marcus stared at Tom, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "Tom, I don't know what's going on here, but you definitely have me confused with someone else. But you look exactly the same. Same face, same voice, even the same way of gesturing when you talk." Tom pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos. But what he showed Marcus next would make the situation even more bizarre. "Look at this," Tom said, holding up his phone. "This is from my high school yearbook. Elmwood High, class of..." On the screen was a photo of someone who looked exactly like Marcus. Same face, same hair, even the same slight scar above the left eyebrow that Marcus had gotten falling off his bike as a kid. The name under the photo read Marcus Chen. Marcus stared at the image, feeling like the world had shifted around him. "This is impossible. See? I told you we knew each other. You were in my chemistry class senior year." But Marcus had graduated from high school in San Diego in 2010, not Charlotte. He remembered every detail of his senior year, his teachers, his friends, his graduation ceremony. "Tom, I don't understand what's happening here. But that's not me. I've never been to Elmwood High." Tom scrolled through more photos on his phone, showing Marcus image after image of someone who appeared to be his identical twin living a parallel life in Charlotte. "Here you are at homecoming. And this is from when we went camping at Lake Norman. Remember, you caught that huge bass and wouldn't stop talking about it. Marcus recognized none of the events Tom was describing, but the face in every photo was undeniably his own. But the mystery was about to get even deeper. Tom, can you tell me more about this other Marcus? What happened to him after high school? Tom's expression grew sad. That's the thing, nobody knows. Right after graduation, you just disappeared. Your parents said you'd gone to college in California, but you never came back to visit. You never responded to emails or calls. It was like you just vanished. When exactly did he disappear? Summer of 2010. Right after we graduated. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Summer of 2010 was when he'd started college at UC San Diego. It was also around the same time he'd begun having strange dreams, vivid nightmares about places he'd never been and people he'd never met. Tom, this other Marcus, did he have any family here? His parents, yeah. Robert and Linda Chen. They still live in the same house on Maple Street. They never got over him disappearing like that. Marcus felt a wave of confusion wash over him. His parents were named Robert and Linda Chen, but they lived in San Diego and had never mentioned living anywhere else. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Are you sure this other Marcus looked exactly like me? Tom studied Marcus's face carefully. Not just similar. Identical. Down to that scar above your eyebrow and the way you bite your lip when you're thinking. But Marcus was about to make a discovery that would change everything he thought he knew about himself. Tom, would you be willing to drive me to Maple Street? I need to see this house. Tom looked uncertain. I don't know if that's a good idea. Robert and Linda never got over losing their son. Seeing someone who looks exactly like Marcus might be too painful for them. Please, I need to understand what's happening here. After a long moment, Tom nodded. Okay, but we should probably prepare them first. As they drove through Charlotte toward the west side of town, Marcus's mind was racing. Could he have an identical twin he didn't know about? Could his parents have hidden something from him his entire life? When they turned onto Maple Street, Marcus felt a strange sense of recognition, even though he was certain he'd never been there before. That's the house, Tom said, pointing to a blue house with a large oak tree in the front yard. Marcus stared at the house, and suddenly a flood of images filled his mind. Playing in that yard, climbing that tree, sitting on that porch. But these weren't memories of his own experiences. They felt like someone else's memories that had somehow gotten mixed up with his own. Tom, something very strange is happening to me. I'm starting to remember things about this place, but I know I've never been here. Tom parked the car across the street from the house. What kind of things? I remember falling out of that tree when I was 7 and breaking my arm. I remember my mom, Linda, teaching me to ride a bike in that driveway. But Tom, these aren't my memories. My real mom taught me to ride a bike in San Diego. But the revelations were just beginning. As they sat there, an older woman came out of the blue house to water the plants on her front porch. Even from across the street, Marcus could see that she looked remarkably similar to his own mother. That's Linda Chen, Tom said quietly. Marcus watched the woman tend to her flowers, and more memories that weren't his own began surfacing. He could remember her making breakfast in that kitchen. Remember her reading him bedtime stories in what must have been his bedroom upstairs. Tom, I think I need to talk to her. Are you sure? This could be really traumatic for everyone involved. But Marcus was already getting out of the car. He felt drawn to that house, to that woman by something stronger than curiosity. As he crossed the street, Linda looked up from her flowers. When she saw his face, she dropped her watering can and stared at him in shock. Marcus, she whispered, tears immediately filling her eyes. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think there might be some kind of situation we need to talk about. Linda Chen looked at him as if she were seeing a ghost, which, in a way, she might have been. You look exactly like my son, exactly like Marcus did when he left for college 12 years ago. Ma'am, this is going to sound impossible. But I am Marcus Chen, but I'm also not your son. I think there might be two of us. Linda invited Marcus and Tom into her house. And what Marcus saw inside shook him to his core. The living room was filled with photos of someone who looked exactly like him, living a life he'd never lived, birthday parties he'd never attended, Christmas mornings he'd never experienced, family vacations he'd never taken. But in one photo something caught his attention that made his heart stop. Mrs. Chen, who is that man in this photo with the other Marcus? Linda looked at the picture Marcus was pointing to. That's Robert, my husband. Marcus's father. The man in the photo was identical to Marcus's own father in San Diego. This is impossible, Marcus whispered. These are my parents, but they live in California and they've never mentioned having another son. Linda stared at him in confusion. What do you mean, these are your parents? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Linda a recent photo of himself with his parents in San Diego. Linda gasped. That's Robert and me. But how can that be? We've lived in this house for 20 years. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Mrs. Chen, can you tell me exactly what happened when your Marcus left for college? Linda's eyes grew distant with memory. It was so strange. One morning in July 2010, I woke up and found a note on the kitchen table saying he'd gotten into a college in California and had to leave immediately. But the handwriting wasn't quite right and he'd never mentioned applying to any schools in California. She continued. Robert and I tried calling him, tried finding him, but it was like he'd never existed. The college he supposedly went to had no record of him. It was as if our son had been replaced by someone else entirely. Marcus felt the world spinning around him. Mrs. Chen, July 2010 is when I started having those dreams. Dreams about this house, about you and Robert, about a life I'd never lived. Tom had been listening to this conversation in stunned silence. Marcus, what if somehow you and the other Marcus switched places? What if there was some kind of accident or, I don't know, some kind of impossible event that made you trade lives? The idea sounded insane, but it was the only explanation that made sense of the impossible evidence they were facing. Mrs. Chen, do you have any home videos of your Marcus? Something I could watch to see if I recognize anything. Linda brought out an old camcorder and showed Marcus videos from the other Marcus's childhood. As he watched, more and more memories that weren't his own came flooding back. He could remember the birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese that Tom had mentioned. He could remember catching that bass at Lake Norman. He could remember every moment of a childhood he'd never lived, as if it were being unlocked by seeing the evidence. But he also remembered his real childhood in San Diego, with perfect clarity. Somehow, impossibly, he seemed to have the memories of two completely different lives. That's when Linda made a suggestion that would provide the final piece of the puzzle. Marcus, there's something I need to show you. Something I've kept in your room, his room, all these years. She led him upstairs to a bedroom that felt familiar despite being completely foreign. On the desk was a journal, and Linda handed it to him. Your Marcus was keeping this journal right before he disappeared. Maybe it will help explain what happened. Marcus opened the journal and read the last entry, dated July 5th. Something strange is happening to me. I keep having dreams about living in California with people who look like mom and dad, but aren't them. In the dreams, my name is still Marcus Chen. But everything else is different. I have different memories, different experiences. It feels like there's another version of me out there, living a completely different life. Tonight, I'm going to try something. I'm going to see if I can somehow trade places with that other Marcus. I don't know how, but I feel like it's possible. If this works, I hope the other me treats my parents well. Marcus read the entry twice, then looked up at Linda and Tom. He did it on purpose. The other Marcus wanted to trade places with me. But why? Linda asked, tears in her eyes. Marcus thought about his dreams, about the strange sense of longing he'd always felt for a life he couldn't quite remember. Maybe he was as curious about my life as I've always been about his. Maybe somehow, through our dreams, we were connected across the country, living parallel lives, and we both wanted to see what it would be like to be the other person. But that still didn't explain the how of what had happened. Tom had been quiet during this revelation, but now he spoke up. Marcus, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you before because it seemed too crazy. What is it? The night before the other Marcus disappeared, there was a strange electrical storm, lightning like I'd never seen before, and it seemed to be centered right over this neighborhood. The power was out for hours, and when it came back on, a lot of people reported having vivid dreams about being other people, living other lives. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. What if that storm somehow created a connection between me and the other Marcus? What if it made the switch possible? Linda was staring at Marcus with a mixture of hope and heartbreak. So, you're saying my real son is living your life in California, and you've been living his life? Not living his life, Marcus corrected. I've been living my own life, but with his memories mixed in with mine, and he's probably been living his life with my memories. The weight of this realization was staggering. Marcus had two sets of parents, two sets of memories, two complete lives that had somehow been woven together by an impossible event. But now he had to make an impossible choice. Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that even though I'm not your biological son, the memories I have of growing up in this house, of you and Robert being my parents, those feel real to me. They feel like they're part of who I am. Linda reached out and took his hand. And I want you to know that even though you're not the son I raised, seeing you, talking to you, it feels like having Marcus back. But what do we do now? Tom asked. How do we handle this situation? Marcus thought about his parents in San Diego, who had no idea that their son had mysteriously acquired a second set of memories and a second family across the country. I think I need to call my parents in California and tell them what's happened. And then, maybe we need to find a way for both families to meet. Over the next several days, Marcus made the most difficult phone call of his life, explaining to his parents in San Diego that he'd discovered he had what could only be described as a twin brother, who had somehow traded places with him 12 years earlier. Remarkably, his father in San Diego had a confession to make. Marcus, there's something your mother and I never told you. Starting in 2010, right around the time you started college, you began talking about memories that didn't match your childhood. You'd mentioned places in North Carolina, people we'd never met, experiences you'd never had. We thought it was just stress from starting college. His mother added, and we started having strange dreams too. Dreams about living in Charlotte, about having a son who looked just like you but lived a completely different life. The electrical storm Tom had mentioned wasn't just a local phenomenon. Marcus's research revealed that on the same night in July 2010, there had been similar unusual electrical activity reported in San Diego. Whatever had caused the connection between the two Marcus Chens had affected both families, creating a bridge between two parallel lives that should never have intersected. But the most amazing development came 6 months later. Both families decided to meet in Charlotte for what they called the reunion. Marcus's parents flew in from San Diego, and together with Linda and Robert Chen, they tried to piece together the mystery of their shared son. What they discovered was that both versions of Marcus had been living hybrid lives. Marcus in San Diego had his original memories, plus the Charlotte Marcus's childhood memories, and somewhere out there the Charlotte Marcus was presumably living in California with both sets of memories as well. The two families decided to maintain contact, accepting that they shared a son in the most impossible way imaginable. Marcus continued his travels, but now with a deeper understanding of identity and the mysterious connections that can exist between people. That day taught me that our lives are more interconnected than we can possibly understand. Marcus reflects now. Somewhere out there is another version of me living a life that's both completely different and exactly the same as mine. He still has dreams about the Charlotte house, about Linda and Robert Chen, about a childhood that belongs to him and yet doesn't. But now he understands that those dreams aren't fantasy. They're memories of a life that's as real as his own. Tom Bradley became a lifelong friend, fascinated by the mystery they'd uncovered together. Linda and Robert Chen gained a son who wasn't their son but somehow was. And Marcus learned that sometimes the most important journey isn't about discovering new places, but about discovering new versions of yourself that you never knew existed. The silver Honda that had stopped for him that day hadn't just given him a ride to Charlotte, it had given him a second family, a second set of memories, and a second chance to understand the infinite possibilities of human connection. Sometimes when you get into a stranger's car, you discover that the stranger isn't really a stranger at all. Sometimes the most familiar place you'll ever visit is somewhere you've never been before. And sometimes coming home means finding a home you never knew you had.